Hello, everyone. We are live. Very cool. I feel like our dietitian talks are always fun, just getting different perspectives from our integrative dietitians. It is always a great time. We're excited to be live on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram. So let us know if you're seeing us, hearing us okay. Give a thumbs up or comment down below. We'll do some quick intros. If you don't know by now, my name is James Marin. I'm an integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist, and one of the co-founders of Married to Health. So we'll have intros. Go for it, Damaris, and then Laura.
Yeah, I'm Damaris Hunger. I'm also a registered dietitian on the Married to Health team. I work with kids, families, people with chronic diseases. I'm also a student of naturopathic medicine in my last year. And you can find me also on Instagram under damarishunger.rdn.
And I'm Laura Sanchez. I'm also a registered dietitian at Married to Health. I specialize in women's health and nervous system, emotional regulation. I'm licensed, and I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, great. And if you're looking at today's topic, or if you can see it, if you're not sure what it is, we're getting into it. There's a lot going on. I don't know. I'm sure many are following, maybe many are not, but there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of, and I looked up the definition of controversy lately, and it's just like a differing. Actually, I'm gonna look it up again right now. It's essentially just a disagreement, typically when prolonged, public, and heated. That's what controversy means. And so, really, anything can be controversial, right? Plant-based nutrition, controversial. Eating more animals, controversial. Anything. Integrative nutrition's controversial. Running your own private practice, controversial, right? It's anything that's a disagreement, but it's more public and heated. And that's what we see a lot on X, online, on Instagram, in the comment sections. Like it's public, it's heated. Everyone believes one thing or another. And so even me just saying the title could get people heated, but hear us out. Let us explain. And it's important that we're commenting on this, at least I feel from my perspective, and we'll get other perspectives. And you're welcome to comment as well if you're watching live. If you're listening later on the Good Gut Live podcast, thank you. And you can also comment down below. But we're going to be getting into the MAHA report, the Make America Healthy Again report. And because it was released by whitehouse.gov, you can find it on whitehouse.gov. Overall, it's a very interesting report. And we're going to kind of go through some of the main points and talk about it. And that's what we should do. And everyone can kind of weigh in initially if you have anything else to add. But, it's controversial. But knowing the definition of controversial, it's public. People are passionate. And we all have different perspectives and angles on this. But anything else to add?
I would just add that it's kind of cool to see how the things that we've been already knowing, like we knew this has been happening for a long, long time. And now finally something is being written about it. So that's why I think there's so much weight and controversy around it, because now it's like we're talking about the elephant in the room. It's like we've been hearing about it, we know what's happening, and now it's being kind of like, okay, let's get serious. And now it's actually being exposed in paper from a government agency. So pretty cool.
Yeah, I echo Laura, because I think a lot of the things that are talked about in here maybe were talked about in homes, but not in public. And so I think just the fact that this was published has brought up a lot of conversations. Like you mentioned, the conversations have led to controversy, but it's now in the open and talked about more than it ever was. So that has presented an opportunity in and of itself.
And I just want to say, for those that haven't looked at it, I highly recommend you do. And we're going to go through it so you can get a Cliff Notes version through us, which is great. But whether before, after, during, you look at it, because yes, I highly agree. There were things that I read here that was like, it made me go like, they're actually saying this, because it's been almost taboo, or it's been what do I want to say? It's just not mainstream, right? It's definitely not from whitehouse.gov. And one of the things is just like the lobbying that we do in this country, and really focusing on the lobbying that we do, and the lobbying that's now affecting our health. It's like the White House is saying this finally, because it's the same government that's made lobbying legal. And since we did that, we've seen a sharp decline in our health. And I don't think those are separate issues. But so that's just one little juicy nugget, but there's so many more. But I think some of the main points I want to maybe start with, or just kind of why we're even here and why we're talking about this. And childhood chronic disease was front and center. And so right now, the stats this report is providing, and I think many will agree with these stats, 40% of US children aged 0 to 17 have at least one chronic health condition. Just that right there, let that sink in, is shocking and upsetting. And I mean, what is that? What is there more to say of why this is so important, and why, again, whether you believe with the current politics or politicians or power that's in the government, in the White House or not, this is still the truth, right? No matter if Kamala was president, Trump's president, someone else is president, like this is what's happening, and we need to address it. So just that right there is sad. We're almost half of our kids are sick, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to think about putting this into perspective. We're talking about America Healthy again here. So once again, I always like to pinpoint us. We're talking about the US here. And we're talking about 2025, or like 20, these reports are often like 2020, 2021, 2022. If we were to look 200 years ago, the crisis in healthcare was extremely different. It was focused on, infectious diseases, things of that sort. That has been controlled in a massive way. But we're not at a good point now either. And there has been a slippery slope. And now we're in a completely different crisis, where it's chronic diseases, like you mentioned, 40% of kids with a chronic disease. That should be a statistic that's scary, and it is. But we've come to a completely different crisis now in our time. And the question is, what are we doing with it?
Yeah. And just to add on that really quickly is, the communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases is another word we use in these reports. And I think for the past 100 to 200 years, it's the communicable, it's the viruses, or then the rabies and all these things that come from malnutrition and like bad living conditions. And we didn't have indoor plumbing, so we throw our feces in the street, like all these things. It's like, okay, we need to fix these things. Now it's the non-communicable, it's the diabetes and heart disease. Heart disease is the number one killer, and so many things that now children are experiencing, which is wild. So yeah. And I don't know.
I was just gonna say, like not just obesity, but also like autism, people with mental health and suicidal thoughts, like teenagers just not happy with life, which is really, I think it's a reflection on a deeper level of like what's happening in our environment and as a society, how we all are doing something that now it's being reflected in our younger generations not wanting to leave. That's pretty crazy.
Very.
So yeah, it was very interesting to see the numbers, very humbling and sobering as well, because it's real, it's facts, it's what's happening. And now we actually have data and numbers to show. And now it's like, well, what are we going to do with all of these data, which is really informational and helpful. But now it's like, okay, what are we putting in action so that we do something about it?
Yeah, because and we won't go through all the numbers, but like maybe some just big ones. But yeah, when you're talking about obesity, like we've had a 270% increase in obesity since 1970, which wasn't that long ago. Like that's, even my parents are older than that, right? Like my parents. So it's like that's not that long ago. And then severe obesity is up 500%. These aren't just like it's up 5%. No, it's 500%, which is wild. And so these numbers are also hopefully a nice goalpost, where it's like these are the numbers now. Hopefully in the next 10 years, we now have these numbers, and we can go in the next 10 years, we're going to really just drop these numbers down, right? It's hopefully a nice pin to go like, okay, this is really bad, but we're not going to let it get worse. And let's really take action here and do something, which I think the spirit of this report is that it's going. And really anyone who's on the fence of like, I don't know if I want to read this or take my time, like this has summarized I would almost say the past decade of my experience and my research and my knowledge almost in one report. It's really cool to see of like the data, the stats. I mean, you had to piece this together and someone did it for you. And luckily it's like our tax dollars at work putting this together and going, here's this very comprehensive report, which I really appreciate.
And the calling out too, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, like with the big corporations and stuff like that and the lobbying, it's like, okay, we knew this was happening. Like it's like one of those things that it's taboo. No one talks about it. It's just like, we know about it, but now it's just like, okay, this is
Yeah.
what it is. It's exposed. Everyone can have access to this information. And now, like I've said before, it's like, it's going to be really interesting to see really what we do with this information, because this information is something we've known for a long time.
Yeah, totally. Because yeah, it's funny. I always say like the data is in public, but it's like, oh, it's public record, but it's in the filing cabinet, 64 flights underground in the basement, filed somewhere you'll never find it, right? It's public information, but it's so hard to find. Like reversing type 2 diabetes is public information. Why plants are so healthy is public information. A lot of the stuff we teach and read and talk about is public information, but it's in areas that the public doesn't know how to search for, can't access, or it's behind sometimes even paywalls of publishers by your taxpayer funded studies. And so the way I parallel that is like Citizens United. For those that aren't familiar, we passed public legislation to make it easier and make lobbying more prevalent. And now we're seeing the outcomes of sugar lobbying and dairy lobbying, and the list goes on, where again, our guidelines aren't to really the benefit of the average American in being healthy. They're for the average corporation to make more money in a sense and to confuse and manipulate the public. And now we're seeing that on a White House report. It's like you said, it is. It's almost like, is this real? Like it pinched me. Like, is this happening? And again,
It's like when they've been like
yeah,
gaslighting you, you know, like that really toxic relationship. They keep gaslighting you. It's like, no, like everything is good. And then finally you get, after years of being gaslighted, you're like, finally they're acknowledging you that you weren't
yeah.
crazy. I think it's very
And
cool.
I mean, I got to mention the autism stat since we're going there. Like I remember not that long ago when autism was 1 in 64. Now it's 1 in 31, which was wild. And I remember being I think I almost want to say like when I first started college, autism was like 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,200. It was in the thousands, right? And just in such a short amount of time, it be now 1 in 31, which is insane. It is wild. So just yeah.
I appreciate how a lot of these statistics are focused on children. I don't think that's a common thing that we typically talk about. Research is often focused on adults, and even the research that presented is often with adults, mortality, things of that sort. But this kind of report here is very different in that it really highlights the state of our children and our youth. And this is honestly really important, because if we compare the health of our children today to the past generation's children, there is a stark difference. And where are we headed is the question. And so we are trying to catch it right there and like, okay, what can we do right now to see if we can change anything? One statistic that surprised me is that 70% of the food that is consumed by kids is ultra processed food. That's like 3/4 of your meal. So there are a lot of really shocking statistics here, but I do appreciate how statistics on children is brought up here, because that's not something that's often talked about. And even here, sometimes some statistics are during pregnancy, prenatal statistics, and that is also important, because building your health begins before you're born. So anyway, those are some things that stood out to me as well.
It kind of ties nicely in the name Make America Healthy Again, you know? Well, it starts with the children and the mothers, which they talk about with postpartum and like giving a little bit more of like support to the mothers and how important it is, like the 6 weeks postpartum and just like pushing, I think it was Medicaid, if I'm correct. having more support for the women after they give birth past the 6 weeks, because we know that it's such a fragile time for our women and our children. And so, yeah, lots of
So
good
you're going to see
points.
more of this, but we're going to be doing our regenerative nutrition and gut health experience this October 4th. It's live on our website now, and you're going to be seeing more of this, especially if you're listening to this later and all throughout. But we're going to be discussing regenerative nutrition, and there's no better example than having children. Like literally having children is the way we regenerate a new generation, is the way we regenerate a new future. And if we're regenerating children that are sicker than us, it's like an oxymoron, right? It's like the whole idea of having kids is so they're better than we are. We are having a brighter and better future. It would be like taking our kids and putting them in a school where they're teaching them the wrong things on purpose. So that way the next generation is less knowledgeable. Everyone would be like, what the heck are we doing? And finally now we're addressing it with the health aspect, because that's what we were doing for so long with our health. We're feeding them more ultra processed foods. What? We're feeding them more, even just hyper processed, pasteurized, sick dairy and animal products. And it's like, what? Why? And so now we're addressing the fact that, well, we need to regenerate our future. The way we do that is with our kids, and they need to be healthy. So we're going to be getting into that massively with Dr. Joel Gator at our experience. So we're really excited for that. And that is so important. It's a literal macro view of regenerative nutrition, which is our kids. And then what's really cool, so there are 4 key drivers of this crisis that this report is identifying. And we could take this wherever we want, but I'm gonna try to keep, because there's so much here, but we'll try to touch on as much as possible. But like 4 key drivers of the crisis, I'm gonna start with the most controversial, because some of the initial ones I think are obvious, but the most controversial that I don't think we've talked about enough, especially from the White House, is over medication. Like they literally called out over medication. For us in our practice, it's like a lot of our patients are GI patients. And so we're seeing that in the form of PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, where the GI patients are on these proton pump inhibitors. You should only be on them for a couple of weeks or months at most at a time. They're on them for decades. And it's like, why? Right. And so here, literally the White House, literally our government agencies are saying over medication is part of this crisis. Overprescription of medications driven by conflicts of interest in medical research and practice leads to unnecessary treatments of long-term risk. That is literally verbatim from this report, which is like, that was amazing to see, right? I'll let, I mean, anyone, but yeah, it's like we know, like Laura was saying, the gaslight, like we've kind of known this, right? We know that the lobbying is affecting how our doctors are learning and prescribing and helping their patients, and now the government is admitting it. These reports are admitting it, so it's wild. It's really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I'm currently an intern as a naturopathic medical student, and so I'm exposed to things beyond nutrition at the moment. And it is interesting seeing some of these adverse effects of being on these medications that are supposed to be short term. And sometimes doctors mean to give it short term, but people are not aware that they should be taking it
Right.
short term. I recently had a patient that's been on antibiotics for years and years, like daily dose of an antibiotic, and her gut health is really, really messed up. She's having daily cramps, extremely strong, an IBS picture. Anyway, it's very complicated. So there's like, on that topic, there are several issues going on. It didn't go into much detail about it, but I think that one of the things is like education and like overburdened system. If you think about it, this is a cycle, unfortunately, right? You are, as America's health is sicker, then there's less time in the healthcare system, which is an ideal thing. But when you're trying to figure out and educate and treat correctly and treat specifically, then you want time with your patients.
Yes.
So it's a whole complicated situation at the moment.
Yes, totally agree. Yeah, this is a summary, and there's so many factors to this. And then again, the drivers of this crisis are seeing lack of physical activity and chronic stress, which we've talked about so much. Environmental chemicals was huge. I'm talking about more environmental chemicals, and then poor diet, which these are the big four they're identifying, which, I mean, we talk about poor diet all the time. I mean, there's so much there. And that's where like the stat came. Yeah, 70% of children's calories come from ultra processed foods. Environmental chemicals. I love that they're talking about synthetic chemical exposure, potentially causing developmental and chronic health issues, with regulatory frameworks needing evaluation. So literally, it's almost like this is the government putting themselves on blast a bit, like, or the government holding themselves accountable, because like we rely on government agencies, or aren't government agencies supposed to be protecting us from these synthetic chemicals like the EPA and FDA and even USDA in our foods? And it's like, what's happening, right? Why are these environmental chemicals, and really we call them different names, right? Forever chemicals, endocrine disrupting chemicals. It's kind of all of the above. Why are they so prevalent in our food, in our water, in our air? And it's like, yeah, now we're kind of seeing that or discussing that at the very least. So very cool to see all this.
Yeah, and on the topic of movement, it was also like described how our time is spent, and how teens on average spend about 9 hours of their non-school day behind a screen. And then you can imagine how much of that time is ads, and how much of that ads could be ultra processed foods and things of that sort. So it brought up a lot of interesting conversations.
On that note, I don't know if you guys saw about what Denmark or one of the Scandinavian countries did, that they were like banning or not, like putting like something like a policy where they were encouraging parents not to have children be with the screens until they're like much, like older and stuff like that. And it was like going all over, and I was like, that's cool, because I think it's one of the influences on why so many teenagers, like seeing it also like with people that come through, like as patients, teenagers, 19 years old, like 18 years old, like struggling with so many things mentally. They have like so many medications to just cope with life. And that's just crazy to me, that I think back in the day, they barely used anything for, mental health, which probably wasn't, wasn't one extreme. They were probably struggling, but also made them more resilient. I don't know, like it's kind of like hard to judge, but at the same time is, so young and using so many SSRIs. How do you call them? SSRIs?
SSRIs,
yeah. For mental
I don't
health.
know anyone who doesn't have a problem with scrolling. I mean, it's just a weird, whether you're on like a YouTube, or I mean, there's so many options, right? YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. It's like, oh, why am I scrolling on this? Or like, even if it's even healthy content or something, you're like, oh, I'm looking at so much so quickly, and it's made that way, and you're like, wait, what am I doing? And it's so prevalent, and I see it on kids as well, even whether kids I know or kids I'm just around, they're just on their devices, and just whether it's looking at sports or dancing, or I mean, let alone inappropriate things that are on these apps. And it's like just a constant stream of dopamine and stimulation. And yeah, that's huge. And that's nice to see them addressing it and talking about it for sure. Yeah.
And just to add to that, like, even for me that I'm aware, I still do these myself. I find myself scrolling for a long time, and then just like not even remembering why I was there to begin with. That sometimes for me it's wild. I go in with a specific reason. I literally have to like repeat it to myself before I go in, because I've known myself that I go in and I get lost, and then I have to kind of pause, and I'm like, what was I doing? And then I remember, then I go back. I don't come, like, I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm going to go away. Then I remember again that I was trying to look for a recipe that I had saved, but got distracted in the way to go into the saved post. Anyways, it's just wild. It's like a different consciousness around there, like you just go in and you get sucked. Like it's hypnotizing almost. It feels like it.
It reminds me of like the physical, I think, analogy for this, or example of this, is almost like a Costco, where like you just need to get some of the produce in the back, but everything else is in between, where you just go through row by row looking at everything, and you like maybe will forget like, oh yeah, I need to get like the sweet potatoes they have or something, but all that stuff is way in the back because they want you to look at all the new stuff and all that. I mean, that's like your phone. Like I need to text my brother back, but I pop on my phone and then something catches my eye, and then like, wait, why was I even on my phone? And it just shows you how addictive it is. I mean, just that very sense of how enticing it's not by accident, right? It is by design, and we have to really be aware of that. It is almost like a visual ultra processed food, right? It's like visual ultra processed food that you just can't
Yeah.
help but nibble on and eat and eat and eat and consume and consume and consume. It's pretty crazy. It is.
Yeah, and that environment of it's hard to control and make these choices has pervaded into all these different areas, and this report goes into it of how like hyperpalatability of foods, that means that foods are much more delicious to our brain, to our chemicals, than a vegetable in its natural form, or these kinds of things. A lot of these things is bringing up systemic changes to our environment, to our institutions, that are not helping us make good choices. And so it is an important thing that now it's brought to these institutions, to our government, that may have contributed to these systemic changes or allowed these systemic changes, maybe not even with a lot of consideration, because now we're trickling down and trying to see, okay, well, where have we gotten and what is happening now? What can we do about it now? Yeah, because our choices aren't always just what we want to do, what we think we can do. Many times it is led by the things around us, the things we see, the influences that are surrounding us. In fact, more times than our conscious decision, oftentimes.
I feel like it's harder to be healthy in this modern way of living than it was, like a few years ago. Like it's hard to be healthy. It takes effort because there's so much bombarding and distraction around you. The environment has been so influenced that it really takes a big effort to come back to your center, come back to your body, come back with okay, what was I doing again? Coming back to that piece of you that is like, oh, hello, over here. Have your, veggies and fruits as well. Like it doesn't have to be all those highs or the lows. It can also be constant, but it takes effort. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I'm making notes on that too. Yeah, that's so important. It is like almost by like, can we? Because I'm a believer. The landscape we're seeing, all the numbers, and and this report goes into so many more numbers that make you feel kind of like negative, and it's like, oh no, woe is me, the world's ending, or like, oh no, our children, help them, and which can be, but at the same time, I'm aware and I understand, and for doing this for so long, this isn't by accident. So that can also further make it seem even worse. So like, oh no. But in that same regard, we did this and we can undo this, right? Like if we did this almost on purpose, or I think for the most part, we didn't really know. I think a lot of people are just following the dangling carrot in front of them. And I think whether that's at the very bottom of like influencers who get paid lots of money for their influence versus all the way up to these regulatory agencies, they're kind of all just following the dangling carrot in front of them. And then we've unfortunately woken up and realized where we ran to. And it's like in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And we're like, oh no, how did I get here? Right now we got to figure out how to get back away. But, there's also been some good to come with this. I think in that running, in that understanding, it's like utilizing, okay, the good we've learned in the modern era and modern tech, and merging it with also past things that we've known to be true, whether that's traditional medicines or traditional ways to grow food, traditional, even a family mealtime structure where it's like, let's not all eat in front of the TV, let's eat at the table. Let's not eat while looking at a tablet, let's eat looking at each other, right? And bringing some of that tradition into the modern era with our technology, which we can do, and find a way to synergize that a bit, which I think I'm hopeful in that, right? Again, we got ourselves into this mess. Okay, then that means we can get ourselves out and hopefully become better from that. So a lot there, but
Yeah, and I don't want to dwell on the negatives either, and like the statistics and all of the scary things, but I think we've seen examples in the past even of changes that can be made. I love to talk about the blue zones, and we've gathered all the data. It was fantastic data, but also now they're applying this and they're going into towns. And I just looked up one of the towns that they had been in, Albert Lea in Minnesota. And the changes they made to the environment led to a 14% increase in produce consumption.
Wow.
And a 38% increase in trail usage. So there are changes that can be made. And I think when we're seeking to change society, it goes two ways. One is, yes, the things up top that can impact our access, our resources, our environment, but also from down below, like you mentioned, in the family, in the home, in the nucleus of society, where you're building habits, you're sharing information, you're growing, you're nurturing the children. And so when we put ourselves into this society, and as we're considering, like, where am I in this MAHA report? It's like, where can you start? You can absolutely start into yourself. You vote with your dollars. We've talked about this in the past.
Yep.
And what you allow into your home, what you don't allow into your home, is an opportunity for change. And these statistics don't have to be you. They provide an insight into what is happening, but it doesn't mean it has to be you.
100%. Yeah. And I would even go further to say you should start with you. Like, that is where you should start, with yourself, with your family. If you're a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, or whatever, whoever's around you. But first start with you. It's even taking a second. And this goes into Laura's category too, of like, how are you? How are you breathing? How are you feeling? Right. And like searching within and getting in touch. I know it's like in touch with yourself and with your emotions, but it's so true because it starts with you. Like, if you're not good and you're all of a sudden like, I'm going to help everybody, but you need the help, it's not going to work. Or it may seem okay at first, but again, it's like I'm going to give free swimming lessons when you don't know how to swim. It's like, first start with yourself. And that even takes a bit of effort, depending how out of touch you are with your body, how out of touch you are with your symptoms, or with, all of the above. And it starts as simple as that. And that can even be a challenge. That in and of itself could take you years to finally be like, oh, I'm back in tune with my body, because I've been so disconnected, because I have to work longer hours, and inflation. And again, we're seeing the results of this corporate lobbying of kind of the road we've been on for so long. And it's 100% affecting how we raise families, how we treat ourselves, how connected we are to our environments, how connected we are to food. The list goes on and on. So I second that. I add to that and say you should start with yourself and your family. That's where to start. But yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and how aware are you of where you are? That's kind of where it starts too. Is like, Laura loves to talk about this, but I even remember in my childhood, my dad encouraged us at the end of the day. He's like, let's talk about the day. Like, let's think about the things that we loved about our day, and the things that, we find that maybe we didn't love about our day and we don't want happening again. And so in our quick society, these things don't often happen. We don't often take a moment to see, where are we in terms of my health, in terms of the things I enjoy, in terms of how I feel. Yeah, we've got to take a break and like almost make an intention to consider where we're at, to consider how we feel.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'll maybe give an opposite story time of that, where I remember my family, it was more of like escape a bit more, I think was more of the norm. You had a long day, eat a big bowl of ice cream, let's watch TV all together in the living room. And I think we're all together from what I remember. Sometimes we ate at the table, but I think the norm was like, we even had the TV trays, put the tray in front of the couch and eat, and you're watching TV. And I remember watching all the TV, and it wasn't, and you're just kind of zoned out, and you're eating delicious, palatable food and going, that's where I'm not getting the endorphins, and it's different chemicals, right? That connection when you're facing your parents and you're talking about hard things, that's like the oxytocin, and you're releasing and making different connections versus, the dopamine from just watching an exciting show and eating a bowl of ice cream. It's a very different chemical, and it's going to develop your brains and emotion differently, right? And so you see how, just that slight shift where Damaris is saying, her dad would go, "How's everyone? How's the hard day?" And that slight shift versus not doing that is drastic, is massive, and it's so simple. I mean, it can be a little hard if you're not used to it, but it's so simple at the end of the day. That's huge. That's cool.
And with these two examples, I would add, even if you didn't have a parent that was like aware and connected, like James, like maybe it was a little bit more different in that regards. No matter what, your body always has your back, because even when you're at your lowest or at the sickest point in your life, your body's like trying to show you like, hey, this is not the way. And it's gonna get to a point, probably like for you, James, where you are like, okay, something needs to change. Like the way that I'm going, the path that I'm going is not working out. Even if you didn't have like the support in the environment,
Totally.
your body was with you, and it's the most loyal thing that you will ever be with forever, because luckily you come in with it and you live with it too. So even if you like it or you don't like it, your body will be there with you 24/7, and it has your back, and it wants you to do well, and it wants you to heal, because that's what it's wired to do. And even if you are super sick, that's usually what happens to people that has been disconnected for such a long time, that's their turning point. That's when they start like putting in more the food or the awareness, or like no matter what, you will find the point where you have to turn things around.
Yeah, it goes to that, like we always say, like symptoms are your friends. Like at the end of the day, when all seems lost and you're all alone, honestly, your symptoms are there. And even to take it a step further, like the divine and spiritual, and for me and so many, like God is there. And it's this parallel of the physical world. If you're kind of left alone, or what is that saying where it's like your symptoms will whisper, your symptoms will talk louder, and then eventually they scream, and you're going to have to listen. And the same is true in the spiritual world as well. You can be so distracted with all your friends and this and money, and I'm too busy for that. And you're hearing whispers of something bigger and more meaningful. And then eventually when you've had enough and you're at the lowest low, it's screaming at you where you can no longer ignore. So we have almost two sides of us here, the spiritual and then the physical. And both parallel that, where it's like, are you going to hear the whispers? Are you going to hear it talking? Or are you going to hear it screaming? And unfortunately, bringing it back to this report, many are hearing the screams, right? We're now in the scream phase of like, things are really bad. Many of us are feeling these screaming symptoms, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And now what are we going to do about it? And so again, simplicity is great to start, and then it can go from there. But no, I think at the end of the day, you can do something about this. We can collectively do something about this. And whether it's us we have our own practice and we're doing a lot with it, or it's you in your home with your kids and everything in between, we're going to do something about this and take action. And having that faith and that comfort in that and doing that is what it's all about. It's so important. Embrace the symptoms, embrace the difficult, embrace the hard. That is easier said than done, but yeah.
And we can embrace the data that we got here. We don't want to embrace it, but we can embrace it, and we can let it be a catalyst for change.
Yes, 100%. So important. And kind of keep going a little bit. I mean, one thing I wanted to note as well, they did call out consumer drug advertising. A lot of yes, it's our responsibility, but also it's very cool. There's a balance of yes, it's the person's responsibility, but it's also, hey, we've allowed this to get a little too far, right? Where again, the agencies and what we've allowed, where it's like, yeah, why do we want, or why is there so much screen time? Well, on that screen are drug advertisements that we come across every day. Like I can't tell you whether you're watching a mainstream streaming company or you're on YouTube, you're seeing advertisements everywhere. And many times it's pharmaceutical drugs. And it's odd when I'm watching TV with my father-in-law who's in his 80s, it's all drug commercials. Versus when I'm watching a show maybe geared toward a younger crowd, it's not as many drug commercials. So it's very smart this corporate machine is very aware of what it's doing, and it's very targeted, and they're addressing these systemic issues. So that was really cool. Just this wanted to bring that up as well, where yes, we have a responsibility, but also these systemic issues are of note, and we need to change them for sure. I want to say, but yeah, Phil, anyone can add to that, but also like corporate law being a revolving door. But yeah.
There was even mention of like our dietary guidelines and how they didn't show the full picture, and they considered lobbying and things like that. And I appreciate them making mention of that, because other countries had in the past maybe 5-10 years had changed things quite differently from the American dietary guidelines, with more of a plant-based focus, including like information about avoiding ultra-processed foods and eating with family and things like that, that they have kind of owned up and said we could have done things a little bit differently if we followed the actual science, if we followed the data. Yeah.
Which is so true, right? We've really shot ourselves in the foot here. We've really kind of fumbled and tripped, where it was like, again, going for what's easy and what feels good, which is like money. Like, yeah, we all want money, right? And politicians want money and corporations want to make money, but we made money at the expense of the American people and public health and the quality of our food. And does that feel good at the end of the day? And I think many are realizing like, no, it doesn't. Many are realizing like, okay, I'm a politician and I maybe made millions of dollars, but my grandkids are sick. Like that doesn't feel good. Was it worth it to make all this money and be sick? No, I think anyone with money and who's sick will tell you, I'll give all my money to feel better and have my health back, right? And I think we're almost getting to that point where this no longer makes sense. So very important. I want to, where was I with this? Oh, yeah. So that goes to kind of the revolving door, which they mentioned, which was really, this was called, oh gosh, I'm blanking, conspiracy theory of like, I remember early on when we were just raising awareness of GMOs back in college, like we were like woo woo, like this is silly, GMOs are fine. And we brought up a revolving door in the FDA and Monsanto at the time. Now they're Bayer Monsanto and all of that. And it was like, no, this can't be true. Like, oh, this is silly. Like, no, this doesn't make any sense. And now you fast forward maybe 15 plus years, and it's in a massive government report where they're talking about this revolving door. And for those not aware, it's like you work in the public sector and government, and then you go to work in the private sector because you know the playbook, you know the handbook, you've made connections, and you know how the public sector works and government works. And now you're going to help these private companies manhandle it, go through all the loopholes. And that's where you get these additives in food, or that's where we're testing genetically modified apples and so many other fruits and vegetables that haven't been properly tested. And we're already planting them in test crops as if we can control that. It's a little scary, but you see how these things get fast tracked by knowing the right people. And now you have, again, our government talking about this. And it's, again, almost like they're bad mouthing themselves a bit. It's like, how do we let this happen? We need to change this. And so, yeah, very cool to see this. Surprising. These are a lot of the surprising things that are like, oh, they're talking about this. Wow. Okay. Because it's really making, like, this report is making our government look bad, and it's a report by our government at the end of the day. It's pretty wild to think about that.
I think on the bright note is like, okay, hopefully, with them exposing themselves and maybe taking responsibility and being like, we didn't do the best job that we could for our communities and our population. And I think the first step is always admitting, just like, okay, we messed up. Here is the report. We're just going to be honest and be transparent right now. And you're probably going to be hateful or be angry about it and all of the things, which is part of the process. And then also it's just part of like, okay, well, if we're going to play ball game, then transparency and honesty is going to be like the pillar for our relationship. And I think it's a good step that they're at least showing things that we already knew, but now they're actually talking about it and putting it in paper, even though it took them like what, 40 years. But hey, there's hope. That's all I have to say. At least I got to see it,
Yeah.
like.
I love Laura, how you're framing it. It's almost like, yeah, this abusive relationship, like this gaslighting, and like they'll never admit they're wrong, and they're just gaslighting, and finally they're going, okay, we're wrong. They're like aware of the problem. Like, was the first step is that awareness that there is a problem, and they're admitting to it, and that's like the first step of this path to healing. I'm truly I'm hoping this is what it is, because yeah, this gaslighter toxic relationship, finally the person who's doing the gaslighting is very toxic, is admitting to their wrongdoing, and that is a massive, huge step in the right direction, where it's shocking, it's jaw dropping a little bit.
It is. It's a step, but it's like, okay, let's not back up, like, let's go forward. Show me what we're gonna be doing. Show me the plan of like, okay, I understand all of these things. Now let's do the thing and keep pushing forward.
Yeah. Because anyone who's been in a toxic relationship, you'll know they'll maybe give a little bit only to mask more, and again, you take 4 steps forward and then 5 steps back later on. You're like, well, no, wait a minute, you narcissist, don't do this. And so, yeah. But go for it, Laura. Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for listening. Such a great topic.
Yes.
I'm just gonna
All right.
go, and I'll catch
We'll
up the
talk
rest
to you
of the
soon.
call.
All right. Bye, Laura.
Bye, Laura.
But really great. I love Laura's insight, which is, yeah, that toxic relationship is it's so funny, because it's so true. I think so many can relate. I know I can. And it is that gaslighting. It's that, no, there's no problem. And when you finally get that person to admit there's a problem, it's this sense of relief. It's a sense of, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not alone in this. And now, okay, now let's not lose this momentum. I have a feeling, I feel like that's what so many health professionals are feeling right now, of like this momentum, and we need to capitalize on it. We need to make sure it's sustainable, not just now, but in future generations as well, which is super important. But yeah.
We've got to run with the momentum.
Keep it going. And so with that, what's really cool, and just to maybe go into this section, was like the objectives here. Like, the report lays out kind of this momentum action plan, so to speak, which is, first, they're establishing a clear understanding. So they want to collect more data, which is great. They want to, which is like asking more questions, looking into causes, and create like stakeholders, right? Other health professionals and agencies, which is great. They want to be more transparent. So there's this informed policy and strategy. Support the MAHA Commission. So it's an executive order 14212, advising the president on addressing the crisis through policy reforms and interventions. That's huge. That's going to be like, okay, collecting the data, we're talking to stakeholders, we're doing all this. Now, how do we start to change things? What are we going to see actually change? I had to say that piece. That's the big piece of, okay, now how are we going to reform and change this? And hopefully we can all come together on that. Hopefully we're not, I don't know, hopefully it's not this massive, I don't know, back and forth constantly, but who knows? We'll see. But
yeah, people who get are lost in this. Okay, now we've got to wait for, where can we go from here? What would you tell someone that's like, okay, what can I do?
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah.
Because, for example, it's like some of the research it's proposing, like, let's compare whole foods to these kinds of processed things and the impacts, and like some of these things we kind of already do know which direction we're supposed to be headed in, or which answer we're supposed to be looking for. Yeah. So
what's cool, and that's why the stakeholder, like, there's experts out there who already have this data. There are researchers out there who already have. So it's taking time to connect them. That's going to be huge. But then the individual, like, if you're a healthcare professional, and like, I know some who are going, like, kind of raising their hand and going like, I know this already, like, okay, and they're taking action. So if you're a health professional or know health professionals who are really smart, encourage them to take action. one. And then if you're a person who's like, I can't wait until they release new guidelines in 5 to 10, 15 years, or however long it takes, or finally make a change, it goes back to that, what you're in control of at the end of the day. I know we've done other episodes on this a bit, but it goes back to, I mean, as tiny as like if you're eating fast food and getting extra tomatoes and lettuce and onion and eating those vegetables there, great. That's a step in the right direction. To maybe
Yeah.
you're a well-off individual and you want to fund and support a new nonprofit, or get in contact with other nonprofits who are working on this, please donate monetarily. If I mean, it's everything in between. But I don't know if anything in particular comes to your mind, Damaris, but like the action.
No. I think it's like build upon what you
Yeah.
know, and ask for help too in figuring out how can I make these steps happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's this difficult part between knowledge and action, and it's like, how do you put knowledge into action?
Yep.
But sometimes that requires help. So
Yeah. And what's really cool though, and they also gave themselves a date. So by August of this year, we're going to be seeing some of the strategy play out. We're going to kind of get, I guess, a part 2 or an update on this. So it's not just like, here's our report, good luck. It's more of like, no, we're setting dates. So anyone knows goal setting, and what we do with our patients is like, we're going to follow up at this date. Here are your objectives, and here's your summary, and here's what you need. And we're setting a date and giving you check-ins so that we keep, again, the momentum going. It's not just like, see you when we see you. It's like, no, we're going to retest if we need, or we're going to check back in most definitely and do this. And it's almost like doing this on a grand scale for an entire country. Hey, when's our follow-up visit, United States of America? It's like, okay, August 2025. Okay, cool. So that's nice to see.
we might need to do part 2.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2 on that. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
nice follow-up and check-in, because we definitely need it. So I mean, overall, this is just, it's very cool. And again, it's addressing chronic disease. It's giving dates, it's following up, it's addressing the elephants in the room that no one's talking about. I mean, so much, whether it's, again, autism, whether it's, things like obesity, giving numbers to things. It was overall a very, very great and well done report, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. About time we saw
Long
this.
overdue. I'm hoping we can all put up politics aside, and it's like, again, even if you're like, you lean more left and you're like, I have this data and I'm a health professional, still reach out. And even if it was someone else being a president, and you lean more right and you're a doctor and you're brilliant and you have all this data, reach out. We need to kind of all health professionals on board, everyone coming together, whether you're helping patients or you're collecting data and you're providing that to these agencies to kind of just expedite this and hurry this along and fill in the gaps. Because for us especially, we know whole foods and plant foods are amazing, and we have our own like meta-analyses and data banks, and we're going like, here's what it is. It's funny to see like the gaps in some of this, and not everyone knows what you know, in a way. And it'll be interesting to fill these gaps for sure. And I know people are working on it.
Yeah, that's true. And the more representation is when they come up with these recommendations, the more likely it is to cater to everyone, right? And consider all communities and all walks of life.
Totally. I know it wasn't, I don't know, did you see it was that one guy, I know his name is different. It's Paul Saladino. And they're drinking raw milk in the White House, I think. I was like,
Yep.
I was like,
some things are a little bit, questionable.
I was like, okay, that's, I hope, not the direction we go, but I get it. It's very viral. That's where we have to be careful with these like characters. And I don't know Paul Saladino personally. I don't know how smart. I mean, he's very smart at marketing and what he does, and his whole approach. I don't know how smart he is with research or with his patients. I haven't looked at his patient reviews on Google or Yelp, or even if he sees patients. I don't really know what he does. So that'll be interesting, where we have to balance not letting those characters kind of take over.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like not letting ourselves be led by fads and trends at the moment when there's so much conversation and hype, because we see these things happening all the time in the health universe.
All the time. And we recently did an episode on raw milk, so go back and check that out. Again, we're people can do whatever they want, but we just want, again, transparency and facts, and knowing that there's better ways to get your probiotics and protein and vitamins and minerals. But it's like, if you want to do raw milk, go for it. But obviously there's better, low risk, healthier ways, more conducive to the health of not just humans, but also the planet. And we did an episode on that. But yeah, like you're saying, trends, I hope more of just great facts, more than just gimmicky viral trends, right? That would be great.
And ultimately, like, I love talking about informed consent, but just in general, like, yes, it's a wonderful thing that the public is more aware, that they can now make choices with more awareness and with, like, what do they actually want versus just going with whatever's happening.
Totally.
So yeah, I hope that that's something that people consider more, is where am I putting myself in terms of informed consent? Am I asking, like, give me more information before I make a choice?
Totally. Totally. So yeah, I mean, I recommend you read this report if you're on the fence about it, whether you're listening to this later and it's been some time. I think this report will last quite a while. If August comes around, we'll see what comes from this and continue on just kind of giving our feedback as, dietitians, as integrative dietitians who are working with patients and who run a practice and are in the trenches every day, helping everyday Americans and even those around the world just be healthier and heal with each meal. I think this report does encompass healing with each meal. It's right on with so many things. And again, I think ending with words of hope a little bit, where it can seem doom and gloom, especially the first part of this report, where you're like, oh no, we're in big trouble. But again, you have so much power as the individual. You just listening to this or wherever you're watching this, I know we're not the biggest podcast and the biggest private practice, but we help thousands of patients, even being not the biggest with the biggest marketing budget. It's amazing what an individual can do, what a group of 8 dietitians can do, and they come together, let alone your family, your neighborhood, your community. So it's just like getting started with low-hanging fruit and building from there. And I've seen moms. So what's crazy is Zen Honeycutt, who's the founder and CEO of Moms Across America nonprofit, who's big into this movement. She was my old neighbor like years ago as just a mom, and we would get together for potlucks at her house, and she would talk about Roundup and we'd talk about gardening. We were just friends. And to see this mom turn into, now she's at the White House, blows my mind. Like, so you never know what your passion, what you start to talk about and do, it turns into something massive. And now it's like Moms Across America. It's just a bunch of moms getting together going like, we don't want synthetic pesticides on our food. We want to keep our kids healthy. It's huge. So you never know.
Yeah. And for people who are overwhelmed in all of this, like, yes, sometimes people can help you cut through the noise. And so we're here for that as well. And sometimes there are foundational habits, foundational nutrition things that you need to cover before you get into nitty-gritty of little things. And sometimes I work through that with people. Yes, these changes are great, but this tiny change needs to be followed up after this big major change. So anyway, it's just like putting things in order and cutting through the weeds sometimes that patients need help.
100%. So we're here for that. Again, if you want to learn more about that, go to marriedhealth.com. We are not just here to be a presence on media and make TikToks or Instagram reels and all of that. We work with patients one-on-one. So you can see Damaris, you could see Laura and Rachel, Dahlia, Katie, all these wonderful dietitians on our team. And so you can learn more at marriedhealth.com, where we do take PPO insurance, HSA, FSA, all of that to help you heal with each meal. So Thank you all. Hopefully, comment down below. Let us know if you want the part 2 come August. We'll be happy to do that. Maybe on another dietitian talk with our dietitians here, and we'll go from there. But this was great. I think, again, check out the report. It will be linked below if you're watching this later. And but you can go to.
I think it's also.
Oh no, yeah.
Sorry. I think it's also important to state that we were not funded to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about this report or any of that. Speaking of public things.
Yes, and it is, yes, not funded at all. The White House or the Republican Party did not sponsor this at all. But you
No.
go to whitehouse.gov and you'll find the report there, and it's free and open access for anybody. But thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this topic and content. If you do, let us know, and let us know what you want to hear more about. So as always, feel with each meal and heal with each meal. We'll see you next time on the Good Gut Live podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, everybody. See you later.
Bye.